Today's number is 55, as in 55%. That's how many companies who laid off people because of AI efficiencies later polled and said they wish they hadn't. More than half. They cut the jobs, they announced the restructuring, they told Wall Street it was about efficiency, and now they're hiring people back, sometimes at a higher cost than what they saved. That's according to Forrester's research. And a separate survey of 600 HR professionals by Career Minds found the same pattern. Companies cutting before the capability is proven, then scrambling to rebuild what they lost. We spent this week giving you the scary numbers. Today, we start with the other side. More on that in a minute. Well, it's Friday. Happy Friday, by the way. And this was the week the AI and job stories stopped being abstract. On Tuesday, Oracle fired 30,000 people via email at 6 a.m. to fund AI data centers. On Wednesday, a Quinnipiac poll said 76% of Americans don't trust AI. And yesterday, Microsoft locked Copilot behind a paywall. That's coming later this month. And today, we have the final report card of the week. For the first time in American history, AI is the number one stated reason companies are cutting jobs. Not restructuring, not cost cutting, AI. That's the data from Challenger, Gray, and Christmas. And it's a sentence we've never been able to say before this week. But that's not the whole story, because the companies that move fastest, more than half of them already regret it. I'm Don Michalik, and this is your Morning Intelligence for Friday, April 3rd, 2026. Today is our Friday show, the Friday 3. We're doing the AI jobs report card today. First, the Challenger numbers just dropped, and they're rather historic. AI now leads all reasons for layoffs in America. We'll break down what the data actually says. Then we'll get into the actual Friday 3, the companies regretting AI layoffs, a workplace survey that flips everything you've heard about AI in isolation, and the class of 2026, the most anxious graduates in survey history. In the deep cut, Fortune just published 9 reasons the AI job panic is overblown. And Jensen Huang has the most quotable career advice of the year. We'll give you both sides here momentarily. And then we'll close today's episodes with an AI model that couldn't pass its own company's tests. Let's go ahead and get into it. All right, let's go ahead and get into our lead story today. And I want to be precise here because this kind of story is the one that tends to get exaggerated fast. Challenger, Gray, and Christmas, the firm that tracks U.S. layoff announcements for decades, released their March 2026 report yesterday. And the headline finding? For the first time in the history of their tracking, AI is the number one stated reason for job cuts in America. Here are the numbers. In March, 15,341 jobs were cut, citing AI as the reason. That's 25% of all layoff announcements that month. To put that in perspective, in February, AI accounted for 10%. For all of 2025, it was 5%. So we've gone from 1 in 20 to 1 in 4 in about 12 months. Total March cuts hit 60,620, up 25% from February's 48,307. Technology companies announced 18,720 of those cuts in March alone, bringing Q1 2026 tech layoffs to over 52,000. And since Challenger began tracking AI as a stated reason in 2023, nearly 100,000 job cuts have now been cited due to AI. The exact number is actually 99,470. Now, I want to add a layer of context here that matters. Quote unquote stated reasons means what companies say in their announcements and SEC filings. It doesn't mean AI actually performed those jobs before those layoffs were enacted. We covered this a little bit on Wednesday. Mark Andreessen's argument that a lot of these cuts are about post-pandemic overstaffing, with AI as just the convenient headline here. And there's data supporting his view, which we'll go into the deep cut later today. But the trend line is obviously the trend line. January, AI was a footnote. March, it's the headline. That acceleration is real, regardless of what or who is driving it. So, why does this story matter? Well, here's why this is our lead story today. This isn't a prediction from a CEO or a venture capital firm. It's not a forecast from a consulting firm. It's the actual jobs data from the firm that's been counting layoffs longer than most of us have been working. And for the first time, AI is at the top of the list of reasons. For anyone in this audience who's been wondering whether the AI jobs conversation is hyper real, well, the March data says it's real enough that companies are putting it in writing. Bottom line here, AI is now the number one stated reason for job cuts in America for the first time ever. The question isn't whether it's happening, it's whether what companies are saying matches what's actually going on. Again, we'll get into that a little bit later here. All right, let's get into our Friday three, or the three biggest stories in AI that we covered this week. The great AI layoff boomerang. 55% of companies already regret it. All right, this is our number one story in today's Friday three. And this is the direct follow up to what we just covered. Forrester Research, one of the most respected names in business forecasting, published findings this year showing that 55% of employers regret AI driven layoffs. More than half. They cut jobs citing AI, and they already wish they hadn't. A separate survey by Career Minds, which covered 600 HR professionals published in February, puts more details to that pattern. Of the companies that conducted AI driven layoffs, 35.6% have already rehired more than half of the people they let go. Nearly a third, 30.9%, said the rehiring costs more than what they save from the cuts. And 32.9% of HR leaders reported losing critical institutional knowledge that they haven't been able to replace. Forrester's own analysis puts it bluntly. They say most organizations are sequencing AI adoption incorrectly, cutting before the capability is proven, before the workforce is ready, and before the institutional knowledge required to make the technology work has been properly transferred or preserved. Think about what that means alongside the challenger data here. Yes, AI is now the number one reason for layoffs, but more than half of the companies doing the cutting are already backtracking. The knife is swinging, but it's swinging before the replacement is already ready. The bottom line here, if your company is talking about AI driven restructuring, you now have a data point worth sharing with whomever is making that decision. 55% already regret it. That's Forrester, not a blog post. And a third of the companies that did it spent more time and more money fixing the damage than they saved. All right, our second story in today's Friday three. Story number two. And this one is the counterintuitive story of the week. Gensler, the global architecture and design firm that studies how people work, just released their 2026 Global Workplace Survey. 16,459 office workers across 16 countries. This is one of the largest studies of its kind. The headline finding here: 30% of employees now qualify for what Gensler calls, quote unquote, AI power users, people who regularly use AI tools in both their professional and personal lives. And here's where it gets rather interesting. You'd expect the people using AI the most to be the most isolated. Maybe their heads down, headphones on, talking to machines instead of the people. Well, the data says it's actually the opposite. AI power users spend 37% of their work week working alone, compared to 42% of late adopters. They spend approximately 1.5 times more hours learning, 12% of their time versus 8%. They score significantly higher on innovation, engagement, and team relationships. And they spend nearly twice as much of their work week at client sites or co-working spaces or traveling, compared to people who haven't adopted AI tools. The people leaning hardest into AI are not becoming more machine-like. They're becoming more mobile, more collaborative, and more connected to the people that they work with. The bottom line here, if you've been holding back on AI tools because you're worried they'll make you feel less human, well, the study of more than 16,000 workers across 16 countries says the opposite. The AI power users are usually the most plugged in people in the office. All right, our final story in today's Friday three, and this one hits a little bit different depending on your age. Monster's 2026 State of the Graduate Report, conducted by Pollfish, surveying over 1,000 U.S. college graduates and soon to be graduates, found that 89% of the class of 2026 believe AI could replace their entry level jobs. 89%. A year ago, that number was 64%. That's a 25-point jump in just 12 months. And the data from Handshake, the largest career network for college students, backs it up with harder numbers. Job postings for new grads dropped 16% year over year. Applications per opening jumped 26%. Fewer seats, more people fighting for them. BlackRock CEO Larry Fink weighed in on this month with some direct warnings. At BlackRock's 2026 Infrastructure Summit, he said the class of 2026 could face the highest unemployment rate among new graduates in years, even without a recession. And here's a stat that tells you how deep the anxiety actually runs. For the first time in the history of Monster's survey, job security now outranks career growth as a number one priority for graduates. 52% said stability matters most, and 67% said they'd accept lower pay for longer term job security. 2/3 of new graduates would take a pay cut just to feel safe. Now, if you're a millennial listening to this, and a lot of us are, this might sound familiar. The class of 2026 is entering the job market with the same anxiety the class of 2009 had during the financial crisis. Different cause, same feeling. The bottom line here, if you're hiring this spring or managing a team that's bringing on new grads, the person sitting across from you in that interview may have already convinced themselves they're obsolete. That perception gap is worth addressing in your onboarding, in your management, and how you talk about AI internally. All right, before we get into the deep cut, a quick favor on this Friday. Well, it is Friday, which means this is the episode designed to share. If morning intelligence has been a part of your week, and I genuinely appreciate it, send this episode to somebody. That friend who keeps saying, I really need to pay more attention to AI, but I don't know where to start. Well, consider this their starting point. Text them a link. It takes all of 5 seconds, and I genuinely appreciate the support. All right. We spent the first half of this episode giving you the scary data. Now let's give you the other side of the story. If you've been listening to Morning Intelligence this week, you might be feeling a certain way right now. Oracle fires 30,000 people, AI leads all reasons for layoffs, nearly 9 out of 10 grads think AI will take their jobs. So let me give you the counter argument here, because it does exist, it's data backed, and everyone deserves to hear it. Fortune published a major feature on April 1st. And no, it wasn't an April Fool's joke. Titled 9 Reasons AI Isn't Going to Take Your Job Yet. And the piece makes a case worth sitting with. The core argument, current AI is what researchers call jagged. It's excellent at some tasks and surprisingly bad at others. And because most jobs involve a mix of tasks, not just the ones AI is good at, the technology rarely replaces an entire role. It changes the role for sure, but it doesn't eliminate it. Fortune cites Oxford economics data showing that companies, quote unquote, don't appear to be replacing workers with AI on a significant scale. Their argument? If AI were truly replacing labor at scale, you'd expect productivity growth to be accelerating. And it's simply not, which suggests a lot of the quote unquote AI layoffs are actually about something else. Pandemic era overstaffing, cost cutting, or just using AI as a convenient justification. And there's a specific example that stuck with me here. Remember when Geoffrey Hinton, the so-called godfather of AI, predicted in 2016 that deep learning would outperform radiologists within 5 years? Well, that was a decade ago. In reality, few, if any, radiologists had been replaced. The tools got powerful, but the humans using them became more productive, not more disposable. Now, let's layer in the Jensen Huang angle here. In a separate piece published the same day, Fortune covered remarks from NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang. And he said something I think a lot of you will end up repeating at work next week. At least I know I will. His quote unquote, you're confusing your job with the tools you use to do it. His argument, over his 34-year career, the tools have changed continuously, but the purpose of the job persists. The people at risk aren't the ones whose tools change, They're the ones who refuse to learn the new tools. Or, as you put it more bluntly, you're not going to lose your job to an AI. You're going to lose your job to someone who uses AI. Now, before we take all this at face value, let's consider something here. Jensen Huang runs the company that makes the chips powering every AI system on the planet. He has financial incentive to tell you AI is a tool and not a threat. Fortune is a mainstream business magazine. And the Challenger data we opened with is real. Yes, 15,341 cuts in 1 month, citing AI. The acceleration from 5% to 25% in a year. That's not nothing. So, which is it? Honestly. Well, again, it's probably somewhere in between. Some companies are genuinely restructuring around AI. Some are using AI as a headline for cuts they were going to make anyways. The Forrester data says more than half are already regretting it. The Gensler data says the people using AI most are the most connected, not the most isolated. And the Fortune analysis says the panic is outpacing the reality. This show's job isn't to tell you which narrative to believe, obviously. It's to give you both sides and let you decide. This week, I hope we gave you both. The Challenger report says AI is leading job cuts for the first time. Fortune says don't panic. Jensen Huang says learn the tools. And if you're sitting at your desk right now wondering what all this means, the 55% regret number and the 56% wage premium we covered last week tell you something useful here. The companies that cut too fast are backtracking. The workers who learn their tools are learning more, and they're earning more. The question to what should I do might be simpler than the headlines actually suggest. All right, before we go, again, some fun stuff here. And I wanted to end on something a little bit lighter because it's Friday and we've obviously all earned it. Meta, a company that's spending between $115 and $135 billion on AI this year, has been developing a next generation AI model, internally codenamed Avocado. It was supposed to launch in March. Well, it didn't. According to reporting from the New York Times and Reuters, Avocado fell short of Google's Gemini 3 in Meta's own internal benchmarks. Reasoning, coding, writing, across the board, it simply wasn't good enough. So it's been delayed again. The new target is sometime in May or sometime in June. Let me say that one more time. Meta is spending more on AI than almost any company on the planet. And their flagship model can't beat the competition in their own tests. Meanwhile, they've cut thousands of jobs this year to fund the effort. There is a version of the AI story where the biggest spenders are winning. And then there's this. The most expensive AI program in the world produced a model called Avocado that isn't ripe yet. Sorry, stupid joke. But that's your Friday AI scorecard nonetheless. All right, let's peek into next Monday. A few things to watch this weekend and going into next week. OpenAI's next model, codenamed Spud, has finished pre-training and could launch any day now. If it does, it's Monday's lead for sure. The Musk versus OpenAI trials start April 27th. That's less than 4 weeks away, with up to $134 billion in damages on the line. We'll start to tease and preview that soon. And we'll be watching today's BLS jobs report for any signals that match the Challenger data. We'll have all of that on Monday and more. We'll see you then. And that's Morning Intelligence for Friday, April 3rd, 2026. If you liked what you heard, hit subscribe from wherever you're listening. And since it's Friday, this is the episode to share. Send to that one friend who keeps asking you, hey, what's going on in the world of AI? This is their starting point. You know who they are. I'm Dom McCallig. Thank you for listening and have a great weekend.